Purim, which we're about ready to move into next here, is an annual celebration that the Jewish people have been doing for thousands of years now. Each year, during Purim, the story of Esther is retold, and we hear about how God delivered his chosen people. So why are we, a bunch of Gentiles, celebrating a very Jewish holiday? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is my goal for over a decade now has been to explore the Jewish roots of the faith so that I can better understand my own faith and I can better understand God. Another reason is because my hope is that in doing this can help to build bridges with our Jewish brothers and sisters, especially those who do not realize that their Messiah has already come and his name is Jesus. Before there was Hamas, before there was Hitler, there was Haman. And the Jewish people have been under attack for thousands of years. There have been person after person that have tried to wipe them out as an entire people group. And so we do this to honor them and to remember the God that continues to provide for his people, continues to care for them, continues to look out for them, continues to protect them. That is why we take this somber time of Lent and we also move into a celebratory time of Purim. Now, just a note, Purim actually started Thursday at sundown and ended Friday at sundown. So we're about a day behind, but it's just what worked for us as a congregation this year. So the timeline of what's going on here, the Jewish people, as you remember, they were a free people, then they went to Egypt and they were enslaved, and then they came out of slavery in Egypt, and they eventually got into the Promised Land, and they got to a point where they had kings that governed them. But eventually the Jewish people, they were conquered by surrounding kingdoms. The northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by Assyria, and eventually the southern kingdom was conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And he conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and carried the vast majority of the Jewish people away into Babylon. And they lived under Babylonian rule for decades. Then eventually the Babylonian Empire was overtaken by the Persian Empire, and that is when the events of Esther happened, is during that Persian Empire. The Persian Empire comes onto the scene about 100 years, give or take a few, before the end of the Old Testament time. And so when you read the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, those three books cover that last 100-year period of the Old Testament. The chronology of it works like this. If you wanted to read chronologically, you read Ezra chapters 1 through 6, and then there's about a 60-year gap between chapter 6 and chapter 7 of the book of Ezra, and that is when the events of Esther occur. So you have Ezra 1 through 6, Esther, the remaining portions of Ezra, and then Nehemiah, and that kind of closes out the narrative works of the Old Testament. The things that happen in the book of Esther span a time period of about 10 years. So we're going to try to summarize 10 years for you here in about 30 minutes or less. A couple interesting facts about it. It's one of only two books in the Bible that was written that's named after a woman. Okay, we don't know who wrote it, but it's one of only two books of the Bible named after a woman. And one of the most unique things about the book of Esther is that the name of God does not appear anywhere in the book. But while we do not see God's name anywhere in the book, we see his work all throughout it. So when you hear the story retold today, we're going to do our very best not to actually mention God. And that's not out of disrespect. That's to try to stay true to the text and what it has to say. But rest assured, we know that the events of Esther were orchestrated by Almighty God himself to look out for and protect his people. Another just technical note is the king that reigned in Persia during the time of Esther was King Xerxes. Now, depending on what translation of the Bible you have, some of you have a translation that says Xerxes, and then some of you have a translation that says Ahasuerus. Okay, so Xerxes is the Greek translation of his Persian name. Ahasuerus is the Hebrew translation of his name. So some Bible translators decided to go with the one that's easier to say, and some decided to go with the one that's harder to say. So we're using Xerxes because, as you can see, I have a much easier time saying that name than the other one. So that's the name we'll be using today. But if you have a different translation, it's not like, oh, mine talks about a different king. No, it's the same guy. It's just a translation issue for his name. So our story today has three main characters. There are two heroes and one villain. The first of our heroes is the beautiful Queen Esther. She is one of the heroes of our story. And the second one is, and that'll be played by Rose Sichel today. The second one is Mordecai, and that I will be doing the part of Mordecai today, and I'll be serving as the narrator of the story from Mordecai's perspective. And then we also have our villain. We have Haman. Yes. Now you have to understand that when this is done in synagogues year after year, we don't actually want to hear his name. And that's why all of you have been given noisemakers. So whenever we say the name of the vile Haman, you can boo and make as much noise as you want to drown out his name so we don't have to actually hear it. That's part of the fun of the service, so get into it, have fun. This is one of the only times you're going to be allowed to boo in church, okay? Right? And no one's going to get upset with you. So I hope you enjoy this time with us today. I want to invite Josh and Rose to come up front now and get ready for us. So we boo Haman, but we also cheer our heroes too. So if I happen to mention the beautiful Queen Esther, yeah, and if the beautiful Queen Esther happens to mention Mordecai, and what do we do about the vile Haman? So just a quick programming note too. Many of you in the room know Rose already. Some of you might know Josh because Josh is also one of the pharmacists over at the Walmart in Hampstead. And he is also a pastoral intern at Grace Fellowship Chapel. He's one of the most humble people I know, and he's playing one of the most vile individuals to ever exist in the earth. So this is a full test of his theatrical ability because he has to play a part that he is nothing like today. And so thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this retelling today of the book of Esther. In the 3rd year of King Xerxes' reign, he decided to display all of his vast wealth throughout the kingdom. And so for 180 days, he put the vast wealth of his kingdom on display. And then at the end of those 180 days, he decided to hold a banquet for 7 days. And the banquet had much feasting and much wine. And the banquet, he invited anyone that lived in the capital city of Susa, from the highest of the land to the lowest of the low, to come into his palace and celebrate the feast for 7 days. Now his wife, Queen Vashti, she also held a banquet for the women of the court, and they gathered at her place. On the very last day of the banquet, when the king was in very high spirits from very much wine, he decided it would be a good idea to get his beautiful wife to come and parade in front of everyone else so they could all see just how beautiful of a wife he had. And so he sent word to his wife to come and parade in front of all the people. Now Queen Vashti didn't really feel like being gawked at by the entire kingdom, so she said no. Now, King Xerxes, he didn't really know what to do with this because he was king. People didn't tell him no. And so he went to his most trusted advisors and said, "What do I do?" Now, his advisors, they were very disturbed because they realized if the king's wife doesn't do what he tells her to do, our wives won't do what we tell them to do. Now, they decided this could not be. No. So they told the king that she needed to be punished in such a way that the other women of the kingdom would respect what their husbands tell them to do. And so they told him that he should make a rule that Queen Vashti can never again come before his presence. He would never see her again. Now the king thought this was a splendid idea, so he gave them the authority to do this. And there's a thing you need to understand about the laws of the Persian Empire. When the king seals a law, when he signs off on it, that law can never be revoked. If he changes his mind later, it's too late. It's set in stone. There is no way to take that law away. So the king signed off on it, and Vashti was forever banished from his presence. And the king's anger finally was abated. Now eventually the king decided that he liked having a queen, and he missed not having Vashti around. So he wanted to have a new queen, another one that he could have for himself. And so a decree was put out that the king's servants were supposed to go and get all the beautiful women from the land and bring them together so that the king could choose his new queen. Now I, Mordecai, had been raising my younger cousin Esther for years now, ever since her parents passed away. I brought her into my home and treated her as if she was my own daughter. Now Esther was very beautiful, and so she was selected as one of the women to come before the king. And in her time before the king, in her time of preparation, goes something like this.
As soon as I arrived, I made friends with Haggai. Because he favored me, he gave me privileges and gifts, including special beauty treatments and food, 7 female servants, and the best living area. all of us who were brought to the palace had to undergo a full year of beauty treatments. Now, the women in the room might think that sounds wonderful. With oils, perfumes, and cosmetics before it was our turn to meet the king. When my turn finally came, I could take anything I wanted with me, but I only took what Haggai suggested because I trusted his advice. I knew that unless the king was pleased with me and requested to see me again by name, I would return to another part of the harem the next morning and be forgotten, like all of the other young women so far. But that wasn't my story. Instead, the king actually favored me over every other woman. He crowned me as the new queen and gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials. He even declared a holiday and gave out gifts to celebrate. I kept my true identity as a Jew a secret throughout all of this, just as my cousin Mordecai had asked me to do.
Yes. Now, after the beautiful Queen Esther had been crowned, I used to go before the king's gate so I could relay messages back and forth. One day, as I was before the king's gate, I heard two of his guards plotting to kill him. And so I got word to the beautiful Queen Esther, who brought word to the king. The king investigated the matter and found that this was true, and so he had the two guards executed. And the king had these deeds recorded in the book of memorable deeds so that they would never again be forgotten.
I, Haman, a grand nobleman of rank, honor, extreme privilege, was advancing in grand style, thanks to the king's recognition of me and my splendid benefits to the kingdom and myself. And throughout all the king's court, servants would bow low and pay the honor and privilege and respect that's due me, Haman.
Boo!
But there was this one at the king's gate. There was this one at the king's gate who didn't bow low. He didn't go down and pay me the respect I deserved. This Mordecai. I found out from others at the king's gate this Mordecai was a Jew. And it got me thinking. If I don't want to dirty my hands and soil my hands with this dirty work of taking care of Mordecai, that would be beneath me. I hatched a plan to completely destroy and annihilate all the Jews from the kingdom. Yes, Haman. Brilliant.
Ooh.
After rolling some dice to figure out the best time to carry out this plan, I then appealed to the king. King most excellent, I said, I've become aware of a certain people that are scattered throughout your kingdom. They don't follow your laws, our laws. They're not beneficial to me. You, O most excellent king. These particular people are of no benefit to you. So if it pleases you, most excellent king, let it be decreed throughout the entire royal kingdom, with the seal of your signet ring, that all of these Jews will be destroyed. I, Haman,
Boo.
always at your service, dear king, will even donate 10,000 talents to your coffers. And the king, always recognizing a great plan when he hears one, gave me his signet ring, which then allowed me to issue a decree on his behalf that in about 11 months' time, all Jews, including that wretched, vile, indignant Mordecai, they'd be killed and plundered. And hopefully I'd get the 10,000 talents back so I could replenish my coffers. Very good indeed. Now that business was handled, I, Haman,
Boo.
was able to, as they say in the hipster parlance, chillax with the king and have a few drinks.
Now I, Mordecai, was greatly disturbed by the king's decree. Things have been looking so good for us. We had one of our own as queen of the land. Now, all of a sudden, because of this vile Haman, our very lives were in danger. So I tore my clothes, I put on sackcloth and ashes, and I came and sat before the king's gate in mourning, day after day, praying for my people.
When my servants came and told me what my cousin Mordecai was doing, I was concerned. I sent him clothes to wear instead of sackcloth, but he wouldn't accept them at all. I couldn't imagine why he was acting this way. So I sent one of my servants to find out what was bothering him to the point of such a public display.
So I talked to Esther's servant, and I told her servant the plot from the vile Haman that the king agreed to annihilate all the Jews. I gave the beautiful Queen Esther's servant a copy of the decree so she could read it for herself. And I pleaded that she please go before the king and ask for the lives of her people.
I told Hathach to remind Mordecai that even if I wanted to help, I could not. Approaching the king without being summoned was not something I could do. No one could. The penalty for going before the king was certain death, unless he decided to extend the golden scepter and spare your life. It had been 30 days since I was called last to see the king, and I had no idea when the next time would be.
So when her servant brought me back the news, I told him, please relay this message to the beautiful Queen Esther. Although your heritage is a secret now, it may become revealed. And if so, you yourself, even as queen, may not be spared. If you choose to keep silent, you yourself may die. But salvation for the Jews will rise up from someone else. But who knows? Perhaps you have been born for such a time as this.
Mordecai was right. I was the only one in a position that could possibly change the king's mind and help save my people. I sent a message to Mordecai, telling him to gather all the Jews in Susa and ask them to fast and pray for me for 3 days. My servants and I did the same, so that I could have the courage to approach the king, even if it cost me my life. On the 3rd day, I put on my royal robes and entered the king's court, where he was sitting on the throne. Thankfully, our prayers were heard, and he was actually pleased to see me. He extended the golden scepter and asked me why I had come. He even offered to give me up to half of his kingdom. I didn't want to share my real request there in front of everyone, so instead I invited the king to a banquet that evening that I would prepare. I also invited him to bring Haman with him. That night, as we were drinking wine together at the banquet, the king asked me again what my request was, and again offered me up to half of his kingdom. I was not quite ready to ask him to spare the Jews, so instead I invited both him and Haman to a second banquet the next day, and promised him that there I would confide in him about what I really would like.
I, Haman, enough already, am having the great privilege and honor due me of dining with the king and the beautiful Esther.
Yay!
Was feeling quite pleased with myself and light of heart when I left the first feast that Esther had thrown for me. I mean, the king and I. But then my mood quickly soured when I saw that Mordecai at the king's gate. He didn't even get up. He didn't show me the respect and authority I deserve. I was infuriated. 11 months is way too long to wait. I'm going to get their destruction now. In order to soothe my rage, I went home and bragged to my friends and my wife about all my accomplishments, my wealth, my status, my privilege, my ability now to have dinner not just once but twice with the king and queen. But that Mordecai and his insolence kept eating at me. Yes, I was Haman, the magnificent.
Ooh.
But as long as this Mordecai existed at the king's gate, I could have no satisfaction. But my wife, Zeresh, a woman after my own heart, gave me peace when she gave me the most excellent suggestion of building a beautiful lawn ornament in my backyard, a gallows 75 feet high, that I might tell the king the next morning to have Mordecai hung upon it. Oh, Zeresh, you are a problem solver. I like that about you, Zeresh. And this way I get to go to the feast tomorrow, and I'll be peace-filled and free, Mordecai-free.
Now, things weren't looking good for me, but it just so happened that very evening the king had trouble sleeping. So he had one of his servants read him one of his favorite bedtime stories. He had him read from the book of memorable deeds. And so as his servant was reading to him from the book of memorable deeds, he read the account of how I, Mordecai, had uncovered a plot to kill the king and had brought it to the beautiful Queen Esther so that the king's life could be spared. And the king said to his servant, "What has been done for Mordecai because of this great service he's done to the kingdom?" And the king's servant said, "Great king, nothing has been done for Mordecai." Now the king wanted to do something, so he asked his servant if any of his officials were in the court. And it just so happened at that time that waiting outside to speak to the king was the vile Haman.
I, Haman, the magnificent
Ooh.
and highly honored one, I think I've said that before, was in the king's court waiting to speak to him about this Mordecai being hanged on my newly minted and hopefully soon christened lawn ornament, the 75-foot gallows. The king, recognizing I was there in the court, called me in, and he asked me a very peculiar question. He asked, "What should be done to the man in whom the king delights to honor?" Great question, king. Who else would the king delight to honor but me? So, before I got around to my request for Mordecai's death, I figured I should be honored at least first. So I told the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on the horse's head a royal headdress should be placed. And then let a highly decorated official from the court, king, go in front of this person and shout, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" "Yes, king, that's what should be done." So the king said to me, "Haman, my amazing, fantastic, highly regarded official, all that you have said shall be done for you."
Wait a minute, vile Haman. That is not what the king said. In fact, the king said that the vile Haman should take these robes and put them on me, that he should put me on the king's royal steed, and that the vile Haman should parade me through the streets, announcing, "Thus is what is done for the one the king delights to honor."
Absolutely humiliated, I covered my head so no one would recognize me, and I hurried back to my house. I told my friends and my wife about this abject humiliation I had endured, and my wife said something that pierced me to the heart. She said, and I quote, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him." What?
That night the king came to my banquet and brought Haman
Boo!
with him. As we were drinking wine together, he asked me one more time what my request was, promising a third time to give me up to half of the kingdom. It was finally time to speak up. I said, "If I had found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." The king was furious and asked me who had dared to do such a thing. I replied, "An adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman."
Boo!
The king left in a rage and went out into the garden, but Haman
Boo!
was terrified and stayed behind, begging me for his life. When the king came back, he saw Haman
Boo!
falling at my feet and got even angrier. One of the eunuchs pointed out that Haman
Boo!
had built a pole near his house that was 50 cubits high with the hopes of hanging Mordecai on it, my cousin Mordecai, who had saved the king's life. King Xerxes yelled, "Hang Haman from it!"
Boo!
And so they hung Haman. Afterwards, King Xerxes actually gave Haman's
Boo!
estate to me, and I placed Mordecai in charge of it. He also gave Mordecai his signet ring. But it wasn't enough that the two of us were safe. The rest of the Jews were still in grave danger. I fell at the king's feet, begging him to put an end to Haman's
Boo!
plan. I asked him to overrule the previous order and to destroy the Jews in every province, because they were my people and my family.
Now, as we said before, the king could not change the law, But what he did was he gave the beautiful Queen Esther and I, Mordecai, the ability to write a new law. And so we did. We wrote a law ordering that the Jews be allowed to gather together on the day that was set for their destruction, that they gather together and defend themselves, and that they annihilate those who were trying to kill them, and they plunder their enemies. There was great rejoicing among the Jews when this came out. And fear of the Jews spread across the entire land because the king had elevated me, Mordecai, to a very high position in the kingdom, and the beautiful Queen Esther, her nationality was now known as well. In fact, people started pretending to be Jews that were really not Jewish. When the great day came, the king's officials sided with the Jews because of the power and prestige of I, Mordecai, and the beautiful Queen Esther, and they came to our defense, and we overwhelmingly defeated those who came against us.
King Xerxes told me that the Jews defeated and killed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons,
Boo!
in the citadel of Susa. He asked me if I had any more requests on behalf of my people, promising that whatever I wanted would be granted. My final petition was that the Jews in Susa would be allowed to defend themselves again in the same way the next day, and that Haman's sons would be hanged as their father was. The king issued an edict, and the next day the Jews killed 300 more men who tried to destroy them.
This was such a momentous occasion that I wanted to make sure we never as a people forgot the provision that had been given to us. So I instituted the Feast of Purim and said this is something that we should do year after year. Every single year moving forward, we should have a feast. We should gather together in gladness. We should send food back and forth to each other, and we should give gifts to the poor as we are commanded to do. Esther confirmed it, and the people committed to celebrating this festival year after year, which is why we celebrate it here today.